Imagine a time when the fate of a life was not shaped by dreams, but by impositions. A time when freedom was an unattainable luxury, especially for women. Think of a world where faith and cruelty intertwined, and survival was a daily, silent, and often invisible battle to the eyes of history. Today we will delve into one of these forgotten lives, a story that echoes through the corridors of time, revealing the harsh reality of a young woman in 14th century England. Prepare for a journey that challenges our understanding of resilience, faith, and the true faces of power. This is not just a story, it is a reminder of the voices that were silenced, but whose experiences shaped the world we live in. In a small house in 14th century England, the air was a constant mix of sweat, sour ale, and the lingering smell of boiled cabbage. It was an aroma that permeated clothes, hair, and the very soul, a constant reminder of the struggle for survival. The father, a man hardened by life, found solace more often in a mug of ale than in ensuring bread in the pantry. The mother, in turn, worked tirelessly, her hands calloused and cracked, trying to keep her children alive with whispered prayers and scraps of food that barely stretched for another night. From a very young age, the protagonist of this story understood an undeniable truth. Children were a cost, and her family had none to spare. By the age of 5, her small hands already knew the roughness of the scrub brush and the coldness of the stone floor. At 7, she helped stir the cauldron, while her mother muttered prayers that the porridge would last for one more meal. At 8, her eldest sister married, leaving with a dowry so paltry that the groom jokingly suggested he must have angered God. Her father cursed the marriage for days, a grim omen of what the future held. By the age of 9, the protagonist stopped expecting childhood to feel nice. Her father now drank more openly, muttering that daughters were curses disguised as blessings. He took her brothers to the forest for a boys' outing disguised as archery lessons, boasting about his days on the battlefield. Upon his return, he patted her cheek, calling her the pretty one. But this compliment came with a price: more chores, more prohibitions. Don't go out alone, don't speak to men. She added these rules to her already long list of do's and don'ts. Freedom was an empty word in her vocabulary. A few years passed, and the young woman reached 12. Her beauty, once a mere detail, now became a burden. Her father, in his bitterness, called her the death of me, a dark premonition of her growing anguish. Every day suitors lined up, hoping to get her hand in marriage, some of them the age of her own father. Her father, in turn, longed to have one less mouth to feed. But in 14th century England, survival was a battle for everyone. And in the young woman's case, the suitors saw marriage as an opportunity to extort a significant dowry from her father, who, drunk, drove them away with laughter and curses. They left, but never for long. Then one day her father heard that the local convent was taking in new nuns. Church representatives visited, reminding him that the convent accepted girls as gifts to God, especially pious, pretty ones. Within a week, her father made his choice. The church promised him enough support for the winter, so much support that he even asked if they needed more girls. He signed her name on a parchment she never saw. On the day she was taken, her hair was shorn before a crowd. Tears streamed down her face as her locks fell to the dirt like pieces of her life separating from her. Women murmured blessings. Men smirked, while her mother cried silently in the crowd. She was taken to the convent, which looked peaceful from the outside. White stone, a tidy courtyard, smoke curling from the kitchen chimney. They gave her a set of clothes called a habit. She expected a welcome of quiet prayers and gentle sisters, perhaps even the warmth of shared faith. Instead, the doors closed behind her like a jail gate. Her first morning in the convent began with the bell at 4 a.m. The sound cleaved her dreams in half. A novice kicked her pallet and whispered, "Get up. If you're late, she'll make you kneel on salt." She quickly learned who she was, the abbess, a woman carved from frost and scripture, who believed obedience grew only where comfort died. That same day, she scrubbed floors until her fingers bled, the cold stones sucking heat from her bones. Meals were bowls of thin gruel, always cold, always too little. She watched priests and seminarians across the courtyard eating warm bread, salted meat, winter pears. One passed her, blessing her labor, but never lifted a hand to help. He called it sacrifice, she called it hunger. In the abbey, the elder nuns enforced silence with zeal. One pulled her ear until it tore because she breathed too loudly during prayer. Another confiscated the extra crust a kitchen girl quietly handed her. Gluttony, she scolded, even as her own robes bulged with stolen comforts. The hierarchy became clear: abbess at the top, elder nuns below her, novices at the bottom. And she beneath even them, a charity offering from a drunken father, a girl marked as trouble simply for arriving unwanted. Her days soon blurred into ritualized exhaustion, kneeling until her knees bruised purple, fasting until she saw stars, scrubbing footprints she didn't leave, confessing sins she didn't commit. One night, while lying on straw that smelled of mold, she whispered a question she didn't dare ask aloud. Is this God's will, or just human cruelty dressed in holy robes? She didn't know yet, but her body was already learning the answer. Years passed, and the young woman turned 15, and just when she thought things couldn't get worse, a decree came from Rome. The abbess gathered everyone in the refectory to read the Pope's ruling. Strict enclosure, the new law of Christendom. Nuns were to be sealed from the world to prevent temptation, to preserve purity, to protect the brides of Christ. No leaving the convent, no touching the outside world, no family, no windows that opened fully, and no wandering in the orchard without permission. The older nuns bowed their heads in acceptance. The younger ones looked like candles snuffed out. And she just felt something inside her wither. In the nunnery, the air grew still. Girls began to whisper that other convents across Europe were rebelling, some trying to escape. Then she heard the stories. A nun in York who faked her death and made a dummy of her own body so she could flee to a man she loved. Another nun ran off with her lover wearing his cloak. Another stripped off her habit at the gate and vanished into the night. Their stories spread like illicit scripture among the novices. She met one such rebel in the making. A young woman, barely older than her, teeth always clenched from holding back tears. She confessed that her family had lied to get rid of her. Her calling was forged by her brother to avoid splitting the inheritance. She wanted out, not for lust, not for sin, just for air. The protagonist promised to help her. The next night she distracted the porter while her friend slipped out, wearing a laywoman's gown smuggled from the laundry. She prayed her friend made it farther than the ones who were caught, and so she did. The next morning the abbess called the protagonist forward. She knew, they always knew. They accused her of aiding sin, corrupting holiness, endangering souls. Her punishment was public: fasting, whipping, and kneeling on cold stone until her legs trembled. As the rod cracked her back, she thought back to her actions and wondered if it was worth it. Not about helping her friend. She'd do that again in a heartbeat. Her question was to herself: was it worth it to stay for her father's sake? She knew that if she had run, the convent would no longer keep their end of the deal. So she looked at the barred windows and realized escape was a miracle. Survival was the punishment. Soon they decided whipping wasn't enough. The abbess placed a wooden scourge in her shaking hands and ordered her to finish the punishment herself. "Strike until the sin leaves you," she said. She tried once, twice, but the sisters surrounding her chanted harder, and soon the blows landed without rhythm, without breath, without mercy. The leather cut her shoulders, then her arms, then her thighs. Warm blood bloomed through her habit, sticking cloth to skin. She collapsed twice. They hauled her upright. "A penitent must stand," the abbess reminded her. By the time she fell for the last time, she no longer felt pain, just ringing emptiness. And in that hollow space, the truth finally broke through. None of this was God. These were men's rules, men's punishment, men's invented sins. Her body was merely the altar on which they proved their authority. And as she thought they'd haul her upright again, a priest arrived, robes rustling like a judge. She thought he'd increase her penance. Instead, he knelt, lifted her chin, and murmured that he would intercede on her behalf. He then pulled the abbess to the side as they whispered. She didn't know what he said, but before long the abbess stomped away. The priest looked at her and then smiled, telling her that everything had been settled. She was soon hauled off for her wounds to be treated. Fever, torn skin, and bruised ribs kept her in the infirmary for weeks. It took her a month to finally walk again. When she got out, she received a message that the priest wanted to see her. So, she went to his quarters in the rectory to thank him for his help. But when she saw him, she had a feeling that her thanks wasn't what he wanted. He moved closer. She muttered an apology and moved to leave, but he pinned her to the wall, telling her he wanted more. It was at this moment she realized that his mercy came with a price. She learned then, in this holy prison, salvation was just another word for possession. She resisted at first, hands stiffen, head down. But he reminded her of her scars from punishment. So she froze, and then she obeyed. One by one her habit got stripped away. She told herself that it's nothing, that it'll end. But a sharp jolt of pain made her scream, and she just couldn't help counting every second as the act transpired. When he's done, she wanted to curse at him, but his glare made her voice falter. So she just whimpered that his action was against the church, and he says with conviction, "I am the church," and assigns her to himself for counsel. The longer the priest kept her under his guidance, the more she saw the convent's true anatomy. Not a house of God, but a machine built on fear, money, and secrecy. While he summoned her under the guise of spiritual correction, forcing obedience through threats and bruised warnings, the abbess's eyes toward her sharpened into open hostility, not because she wished to protect her, but because she had become a liability. A girl marked by a priest's interest threatened her control, her hierarchy, her delicate arrangement with the men who fund the convent. She learned quickly how power flows here. The abbess who preaches piety in the mornings negotiates land agreements in the afternoons, manipulating donations, leveraging noble families, and hiding debts behind layers of ritual. The same cloister that preaches enclosure opens its door wide when wealthy nobles arrive. They treat the convent like a private lodge, bringing servants, feasts, and gossip. Some stay for weeks, their presence disrupting the silence rule entirely. And still the abbess bows to them, smiling through the incense smoke. It is in these moments, carrying wine, cleaning after noble banquets, listening from corners, that she learned how many girls around were also victims to him, even some elder nuns. Her own suffering at the priest's hands became a secret everyone pretends not to know. The abbess resented her for it. The priest insisted her silence proved devotion, and other nuns avoided her eyes. Not out of cruelty but fear. They knew what happens to girls who draw the wrong kind of notice in a place where sin is whatever powerful men say it is. For the next few months her life became a routine of abuse and loneliness. The routine breaks with a faint sickness one morning. Nothing alarming at first. Hunger and exhaustion has ruled her body for years, so weakness is familiar. But when her belly begins to swell, her breath catches in her throat. She knows immediately whose shadow hangs over her, and she knows the convent would never believe the truth. Whispers spread before she even understood what they were saying. Novices stare at her midsection. Older nuns cross themselves as if warding off a curse. The abbess summons her with a look that could flay flesh from bone. "A child," she says, circling her like a judge at sentencing, "proof of your corruption." She tried to speak, to plead her innocence, but the abbess silenced her. She looked around and saw that she isn't alone. The priest behind it all now stands beneath the crucifix among the judges. His expression is smooth, holy, untouched. He lifts a hand toward the other judges. "She invites temptation," he says, "and that's all it takes. The narrative is sealed. Her body becomes a courtroom, and her baby is evidence of a crime against her the convent doesn't want to acknowledge." The next Sunday, they drag her before the villagers gathered for Mass. Bells toll as though announcing an execution. They force her to kneel on the stone steps, belly heavy, knees burning. The priest demands her confession. She denies wrongdoing. He demands it again and again. At last, with the crowd watching, she breaks. Not because she lied, but because truth has no use here. She repeats the sins they feed her: lust, pride, sorcery, disobedience. Gasps ripple through the congregation like applause. Then comes the sentence: banishment, excommunication, erasure. She goes back home since she has nowhere else to go. But her father slams the door when she begs for shelter. "You shame us," he slurs. "You earned this." With nothing but disgrace clinging to her skin, she steps back into the world. not free, just discarded. A woman condemned simply for surviving the sins of a bad man. She goes to the outskirts. It is the only place that doesn't care if she stays or not. It is scattered of shacks, broken carts, and people society spits out like rotten gruel. Months later, she gives birth alone in the outskirts in a drafty hut made of stolen boards and mud. She screams into straw as the contractions hit her like stones, so the village won't hear. One after another, she perseveres alone, as there is no midwife, no sister, no mother to guide her. Just her, the straw pallet, and the sharp memory of the medical lessons forced into her at the convent. Lessons meant for tending the sick, not bringing life into the world. When her baby finally slips into her trembling hands, purple and slick with blood, she presses him to her chest and whispers the only blessing she still believes in: live, even if the world hates you. She raises her son here, far from church bells and judgmental stares. Every day after that is survival. She steals scraps, gathers herbs, barters labor for stale bread. She realizes raising her son is hard, harder than the convent, harder than exile. He grows fast. He's also always hungry, always curious, always watching the world that rejects him. She teaches him everything she knows: how to boil water before drinking, how to mend torn skin, how to run when men grow cruel. Years pass like this, rough and graceless. She's 27 when the whispers start, talks of the plague. First in the city, then in the villages, then creeping along the roads. Farmers bar their doors, monks flee their posts, dogs starve beside dead masters. The world collapses in weeks. She tries to shield her son, rationing food, boiling herbs, praying old prayers she doesn't believe. But the fever finds her anyway. Her joints swell. Her skin darkens. Her breath wheezes. She knows the signs. She's tended to the dying before. He cries at her bedside, begging her to stay awake. She tells him to leave her and not come near her. She fears he will catch the plague too. He never listens. Then one morning she sees a small black swelling blooming on his neck, and her heart breaks in two. She holds him close, even as illness gnaws her lungs. She says her last prayer as a whisper into his hair: survive. Then one morning, her lungs simply stop fighting. She dies quietly. No miracle, no candlelit vigil. By nightfall, the plague cart comes. The collectors don't ask her name. They don't care that she once belonged to the convent, or that her life was chewed apart by vows she never chose. They lift her by her wrists and ankles, toss her onto stiff bodies already buzzing with flies. Her head strikes a stranger's ribs. No one notices. She is rolled through the village she was exiled from, past doors that never opened for her. The cart rattles to a mass pit. There they dump all of them like rubbish. No shroud, no prayer, no marker. Just a mass pit of decomposing victims of the Black Death. Centuries turn, her name dissolves, her story thins to nothing. In the archives, monks copy hymns praising holy maidens, obedient nuns, and radiant virgins. Historians celebrate abbesses who managed estates, anchoresses who chose their walls, mystics whose visions became literature. But not her, never her. Her agony lives only in the silences, in the gaps between monastery records, in the unspoken truth behind enclosure laws as unrecorded screams. In the end, her life becomes what the church preferred women to be: absent. And her son? Well, we may never know. This story, though fictional, echoes the countless real lives that were shaped and silenced by the power structures of their time. It reminds us that history is often told by the victors, and that the voices of the oppressed are often lost in the unwritten pages. Resilience, pain, and the struggle for a glimpse of humanity amidst cruelty are universal themes that transcend centuries. If this narrative touched you and made you reflect on the complexities of history and human experiences, please like this video. Your interaction helps us bring more stories like this to light. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next explorations into the forgotten corners of the past. And to continue your journey of discovery, click on the next video we've prepared for you, where we will unravel another mystery or an extraordinary life. Thank you for joining us in this reflection. Until next time.